the different physical features, the rivers in Pakistan, and how things work over there geographically. And then I'm going to compare very quickly the difference between 2010 and 2022 flooding. So these are the two major flooding events that happened in recent past in the country. So I'm going to compare the different reasons for both these floodings very quickly, and then what were the consequences of 2022 floods, and what are the key challenges that we face in the country. Before I start my presentation, if you are able to log into your Wi-Fi, you can go to this website. I am going to ask a few questions, have some of your input during this session, so that it is a bit more engaging rather than one-way communication. So if you can go to vvox.app in your web browser and join the session. And as we move along with the presentation, there will be a few questions, few prompts, and you can provide your input using your mobile device. So if you can log in now, and I'll proceed. Okay, so the session number will come again when the question comes on the slides. So starting off with the background, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the geographical extent of the country. Pakistan is a big country compared to the UK. It is around 3.5 times bigger than the UK, and it shares its border to the north with China, and to the east with India, and to the northwest with Afghanistan, and to the southwest with Iran. And to the south, there is Arabian Sea, which is basically part of northern Indian Ocean. Administratively speaking, the country is divided into the biggest level is province, and then it is divisions, districts, and union councils. So there are four main provinces in the country, namely Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa to the northwest. And then we have some federally administered tribal areas to the northwest, bordering with Afghanistan. Then we have Gilgit-Baltistan to the northmost. We have Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which India disputes to be their part, and Pakistan, it is part of Pakistani administered portion of the Kashmir. And then Islamabad, which is the capital city, and that region or area is called Islamabad Capital Territory. The population of the country, according to 2021 estimates and a few census was not conducted in the whole country, in a few portions, and it was around 230 million compared to 67 million, around 67 million of that of the UK in 2021. So it's a huge country, a lot of population. In terms of geographical area, Balochistan is the largest province in the country in terms of area, but holds the smallest population. I'll come to that, the reasons behind this. And Punjab is the most populous province of the three. The largest city in terms of population is Karachi. It's also mentioned as being at a risk of sea level rise and other things, other global phenomena. And Lahore is the second largest city in the country in terms of population. And speaking of physical features, the country can be largely divided into three geographical regions. The first one is the northern highlands, basically Himalayas, Karakoram, Hindu Kush mountain ranges. The second largest peak in the world, K2, around 8,600 meters above mean sea level. It's also to the northmost. And it has a lot of mountain ranges within this region. And then we have the Indus Plain, which we will be speaking of in most of my presentation, because of the river passing through this area, which is to the east of the country. And it is basically plains composed of Punjab province, and then some of it is in the Sindh province, which is called Indus Valley. It's not just the plains, it is a very fertile land, a lot of agriculture going on, and there are some deserts as well in here. The main ones are Thar and Cholistan deserts, which are somewhere here, bordering with India. And then the third region is the Balochistan plateau towards the west of the country. Now, I mentioned earlier that Balochistan is the largest province, but the population is very sparse. It is because it is very rugged terrain, erratic rainfall, very difficult living conditions, very sparse population in this province. So it's a huge area in terms of land, but population is very less. And in terms of rivers, there are 5 main rivers in the country, and all 5 of them pass through the province of Punjab. So there is Jhelum River, if you can highlight it here, this one. Then we have Chenab, Ravi, Satluj, and the main one is the Indus River, which is the largest river in the country, around 2,000 miles long in Pakistan only. Sorry. Now, most of these originate from snow-covered Himalayas and Karakoram mountains, and some of them originate from Indian portion of the mountain range, whereas the Indus River, the origin of Indus River is in Tibet, China. It passes through Indian-administered Kashmir towards here, and then passes through Gilgit-Baltistan, all the way through KPK, Punjab, Sindh, and falls into Arabian Sea. A brief, short question here. We speak about glaciers a lot. So, do you know what is the largest? Which region or the country holds the largest number of glaciers after the polar regions? Outside the North and South Pole, do you know the region or the country which holds the largest number of glaciers? It is Pakistan. Around 7,000 glaciers. It holds the most number of glaciers and glacial ice outside the polar regions. So it's something very important to keep in mind when we are speaking of floods, because some of these glaciers are responsible for flooding in some parts of the country. And the glacial melt is happening, as we say, because of climate change and global warming. So we'll be speaking about that in the next few slides. Coming to the causes of floods, we will start with the question which we are trying to answer by the end of this section of the presentation. The question would be that what were the main causes of 2022 floods in Pakistan? So we know some general causes of floods, which is terrain. If there is high slope, there is more chance of flooding, water draining, no absorption or infiltration. Sorry. Then we have erratic rainfall responsible for flooding in Pakistan. Most of the times, the main rainfall or rain event in Pakistan is monsoon rains between the months of June and September. And then we blame climate change and global warming for some rapid snow melt. As I mentioned, glaciers, so they melt rapidly because of increase in temperature. And then we have some human factors. Thank you. Human factors responsible for flooding, such as deforestation, which reduces the infiltration capacity. And then we have a lot of, as I mentioned, the rivers passes through the fertile land of Punjab and Sindh provinces. It is used for irrigation purposes, and there are a lot of small dams and barrages which hold water. And because of sedimentation, their capacity is reduced over the time. And because of reduction in their capacity, the water overflows and causes floods. And then we have settlements, mostly the people relying on agriculture. They live on within the floodplain or near the floodplain because of the fertility of the land. So these are some of the human factors that we need to consider as well. Looking at the 2010 floods, more than average temperatures were observed during the months preceding the flood, and which actually resulted in some of the glacial lake outburst in the northern regions in the mountains of Himalayas and Karakoram. And because of this thing and the high temperature, the monsoon rains, which mostly happen in Punjab and Sindh provinces here, the Punjab and Sindh provinces, the monsoon rain is mostly received by Punjab and Sindh provinces, but because of the high temperature and some glacial lake outbursts in the northern regions, the aerial coverage of the rainfall and intensity was very high up in the KPK region as well. So most of the monsoon rain is received by Punjab, but in 2010 it started from KPK. Now KPK has many mountains and, as I mentioned, a lot of glaciers as well in Gilgit-Baltistan. It resulted in very high water flows in the rivers, mainly the Indus River. Can I have a water break? Sorry. Sorry for that. I have a dry throat today. So as you can see here, the severely and moderately affected areas, all of them mostly along the Indus River. And if you see the water flows here, Tarbela Dam is up here on the top, and then we have a few barrages on the Indus River. We have, I think, around 7 barrages on the Indus River, just one main dam. Indus River is so huge that in some areas it is tens of miles wide. So it's not a very small river, but in the northern areas it's very narrow, very deep because of the mountains, and as it goes along to the south, it becomes wider and wider, and as rest of the 4 rivers join the Indus River, it becomes a mighty giant. So, and in the Sindh, that's why it's very devastating if there is a flooding event. Now coming to the 2022 floods, we have seen some of the reasons for 2010 floods, but the reason for 2022 flooding was a bit different to that of 2010 flooding. This time around, there was a severe or massive heat wave in the Indian subcontinent region. As you can see the temperatures here, this is April, and these temperatures are for April, and you can see the red color showing temperatures around 50 degrees centigrade. So because of this very high temperature in April time, the monsoon seasons started earlier. The water started evaporating from Arabian Sea, forming clouds, and the clouds couldn't go further up to the north to form rains and other things in the Punjab province and other areas, but instead they all bursted in the province of Sindh. So mainly clouds came up from here, most of them falling here, instead of going further north in the Punjab province and then Sindh. So there were also, because of the high temperature, some glacial lakes also bursted, as similar to what happened in 2010. But because of this, there was exceptionally high multi-day precipitation, especially in Sindh province. Now, Sindh province is flat, mainly flat terrain. There are no mountains of any sort, and because of that flat terrain, the land got saturated very quickly. There was no proper drainage, and almost all of the province got flooded. And the extent or the difference of the rain, you can see it was almost in the Sindh province, it was around 5 times more than the average. And also in the Balochistan province, it was around 3 times more than the average. So these two provinces suffered the most during the 2022 floods. And as you can see in this map, most of the damage can be seen in the Sindh province. The red color here shows what's that? Yeah, water, extent of water, which was very high in Sindh province. And the total flood extent as per August 2022 was around 75,000 square kilometer, around 22 million people affected, and around 48,000 square kilometer areas of cropland was inundated because of this flood. I'm going to show you a couple of satellite images to see what you interpret out of those. Not a question for you, Bob. Okay, so I don't know how clearly you can see here. This is Shishpur Glacier in Hunza Valley in Gilgit-Baltistan. This image captured on 2nd of May and this one captured on 8th of May. Can anybody tell what's the difference and what happened here?
So I see possibly the lighter grey colour on the left is surface water, which is being held back by the glacier, and one on the right is disappeared, so it's glacial liquid first flood.
Exactly. That's what happened here. You can see some tone of blue aqua color here, which is basically water. So the glacier water has glacial ice has melted here, and it is holding water here. You can see some patches of ice. But what happened over the few days was that all of that water was dispensed, or the lake bursted. It went into the stream, and you can see just small patches of ice laying on the ground. So this is actually what GLOF or glacier lake outburst flooding is. All the water from this lake went downstream, destroyed some villages, and destroyed a bridge. You can see the video of that bridge being destroyed here on this link. I think I will be able to upload this presentation onto the Geotopics website as well. So you can see that video over there. So this is what GLOF is and what happened in 2022. This is one of the examples here. Now we have seen some of the causes of the floods. If you can open your mobile device, you will be able to see this question over there. You can just put in some keywords, or what do you think were the main causes of 2022 floods? I'll leave this open for around 1 minute, 1 or 2 minutes maybe, and then we'll see what we come up with. Okay, so we will move onto the results slide and see what we have got here. Hopefully it loads up. It's still preparing, and yeah. So here we have the main sort of causes or reasons according to you for the 2022 floods, and I can see climate change as the buzzword or the main reason. Glacial lake outburst, snow melt, heavy rainfall. So those are all brilliant answers and indicates that I have communicated well. Okay, brilliant. Moving on to the second part of this presentation, which is the consequences. So what happened after the floods? We have seen some damages in the maps, some of the statistics as well, but we will dig more into it in terms of 2022 flooding. So physical events can trigger flooding. Physical events can include heavy rainfall or gloves or snow melt or whatever. But human factor is it can aggravate or increase the impact of the floods. As we all know that people, if there's more population living in vulnerable areas, the effect or the loss will be more. So the key question for this portion of the presentation is that we will try to answer what are the key social, economic, and environmental impacts of 2022 floods in Pakistan. I will start off this section with a video or short video, 4 or 5 minute video, which is sort of prepared by a reporter of Sky News. I don't know how many of you like or dislike Sky News, but I'll try to play it.
They've been called the worst floods in Pakistan's history by the country's Prime Minister. 1/3 of the nation's land is underwater. So what has caused these floods to be so bad, and how have people been affected?
For the best of Sky News videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just tap the button below.
An estimated 33 million people have been impacted by these floods, and over 1,500 people have died. Each of Pakistan's 4 provinces have been affected, but the southern states of Sindh and Balochistan have been hit the hardest. Roads, bridges and key infrastructure have been left underwater. These satellite images show towns and cities completely submerged. Communities have been totally cut off and left without food and drinking water.
But these floods will have lasting effects to come. Many crops have been totally wiped out, including 45% of cotton. Pakistan's planning minister says that it will cost around $10 billion to rebuild the country. Now, Pakistan has experienced flooding before, but not to this extent. So why is it so bad this time?
The Indus River, which runs through the country from the north in the Himalayas down into the Arabian Sea, is actually prone to flooding in the months of July and August.
But this is unprecedented, and one reason why is rising temperatures. Now, Pakistan is home to more than 7,000 glaciers, more than any country in the world outside the North and South Poles. Now, these rising temperatures are causing the glaciers to melt, forming glacial lakes. Around 3,000 have already formed, and officials are warning that 33 of them are close to bursting.
A second factor is Pakistan's monsoon season, which started earlier than normal this year. It's been dubbed the monster monsoon.
This monster is something we have never seen.
It typically lasts for 1.5 months in July and August, but the intensity, frequency and duration of rain has been changing.
This monsoon season is different.
This time it's been unrelenting, no break, 8 weeks.
Monsoon season should have stopped by end of July.
Sindh province has had nearly 8 times more rain than normal this year, and Balochistan province has had 5 times its normal level.
Pakistan is the 8th most vulnerable country in the world to extreme weather, and melting glaciers caused by rising temperatures can be attributed to global warming.
In April, the mercury in Sindh's Nawab Shah hit a whopping 50 degrees Celsius.
It is an entirely new level of climate-led catastrophe.
Pakistan has said it's at the ground zero of climate change, despite their carbon footprint being less than 1% of global emissions. And the country's planning minister has said richer countries have a responsibility to help the nation because they've caused climate change. Pakistan's government has been widely criticised for ignoring the urgency of climate change and not building enough preventative infrastructure. In 2010, massive floods killed around 2,000 people, but since, no plans have been implemented to prevent future floods. And now, newly formed glacial lakes have become tourist attractions. Developers have been given permission to build hotels on the banks of swollen rivers with disastrous effects. The floods could hardly have come at a worse time for a country already in turmoil. Pakistan's elected Prime Minister Imran Khan was ousted in April, leading to political turmoil. Inflation and employment are high, and the rupee is depreciating.
As well as difficulty distributing aid and reaching cut-off communities, there are now fears of waterborne diseases spreading because the water simply isn't draining away. As for climate change, the number of days of predicted rainfall in Pakistan are set to rise massively. Even a limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius on global warming by 2050 will still mean a third of Pakistan's glaciers melting.
Okay, so I hope this covers a lot of things regarding 2022 floods, the reasons, some of the impacts, and some of the challenges as well. We will recap some of these in this section of the presentation and the next one as well. Coming back to my talk, this is a satellite image of one of the airports in Sindh province named Saad Sharif Airport. This image was captured in 2020, and you can see September 2022, you can't see the airstrip or the roads leading to it, and then October 2022, you see that water has receded but not to a larger extent. The floods actually peaked in August and September time, but even in October you can see the water still over there. The main reason I mentioned earlier is flat terrain. There is no proper drainage in Sindh province, and the water is really just stranded. It's just there. It's not going anywhere. So very, very poor drainage is one of the factors responsible for the flooding or prolonged flooding in this region as well. And in this image, this is Manchar Lake, and the airport I showed you is just right here, around here, in the north of this lake. And to the east of this lake is Indus River flowing here, right here. So because of heavy rainfall, any lakes in the province, they were all flowing because of the heavy rainfall. There was no saturation, no drainage, and nowhere else for the water to go. So even the lakes overtopped, and you can see here the damage it has caused. This was one of the reasons for the Saad Sharif airport to get inundated, and the water had nowhere to go. And in terms of houses damaged, you can see in the different districts, most of them being damaged in the province of Sindh. Around 1,000 people died in this flood, 1,600 were injured, and you can see the number of houses that were damaged. Around 0.7 million livestock was lost, and around 2 million acres of crops were affected. These are the figures of August 2022, which changed slightly, increased in fact by the next time the reports were generated. Around 2,000 hospitals and medical facilities, health centers were damaged or destroyed because of this flood, and you can see the number of livestock losses increased during the estimates made in September or November time period. Life losses 1,700, 2 million houses damaged or destroyed, and the economic loss was estimated to be around $30 billion. The United Nations Secretary General also said that Pakistan needs massive financial support to respond to the crisis, as according to the initial estimates, the losses are around $30 billion. Speaking of the long-term impacts, around 4 million children were exposed, or some of them rather, are still being exposed to the contaminated and stagnant flood water. Because the houses were damaged, you can see how many houses were damaged. They're not being rebuilt as quickly as it could have been because of the financial constraints and the political situation in the country, which was covered slightly. I'm not in the video, but I'm not going into that detail. But there are a lot of issues on the ground responsible for the people who are still suffering because of this flood. And then because of the stagnant flood water, there are a lot of physical health issues such as malaria, cholera, and other cases which are still people are still suffering from those. And then there is anxiety, stress, and trauma when you speak to the people in terms of mental health issues, and they are still very worried about their future. And because of these worries, anxiety, and stress, and economic issues, people are sort of moving towards negative coping strategies such as selling their livestock or pulling out their children from the schools wherever they are going or not. So skipping meals. So these are all negative coping strategies. So all of this is bringing or deteriorating the situation of the people in the flood affected areas. And apart from Pakistan, there was also some regional impacts, because I mentioned that the heat wave was very severe in the Indian subcontinent. So India suffered around 2,000 deaths and around 4.2 billion in terms of losses. 7.2 million people were affected in Bangladesh, and around 5 billion economic losses were reported by China because of 2022 floods. We have covered some of the impacts of the floods. We can go back to our mobile devices and answer to some of the questions. First one is, what are the key social impacts of 2022 floods? What do you think they are in terms of social impacts only? And the next question would be for the economic, and then the third one would be for the environmental impacts. So what do you think are the key social impacts of 2022 floods in Pakistan? Okay, so we have a few results here, very interesting ones. Homelessness, death, displacement, anxiety, hospitals, people still suffering, infrastructure loss. So yes, we have structural and non-structural damages because of the floods. Very good. The next one is, what do you think of the economic impacts? Some of these might overlap with the social ones. So if you can just very quickly go back to your app. Okay, so what do you have here? Yeah, loss of livelihood, infrastructure costing money, job loss, farming, agricultural loss, property loss, cotton crop, exactly. So you can see huge economic impact of the floods as well. And what do you think of the environmental impacts? We haven't covered this much in our talk or the video you saw, but I would like to see your thoughts on this one. Okay, good ones. Stagnant water, water pollution, loss of habitat, loss of fertile land. But in a longer run, it's said that maybe it will become more fertile because of the floods, because of the nutrients it brings. But in the shorter run, we can call it environmental loss or degradation. Sediments, of course, animals drowned. So we have a lot of environmental impacts of the flood as well. Thank you so much for your responses. Coming over to the last portion of this presentation, sorry I have taken so long. It's been a long presentation. The key challenges that the country face. Our question for this session would be, what are the main challenges for developing countries like Pakistan towards flood prevention and mitigation? So as it was covered in the video you just saw, Pakistan contributes less than 1% to the global emissions, but the data shows that it's the 8th most vulnerable country according to the Global Climate Risk Index, in terms of getting affected because of the climate change. And the country has to face huge losses in terms of the events like the 2022 floods because of the emissions, which are mainly coming from probably more developed countries. As you can see in this list, there are probably, I think, none of the countries is the developed ones. Yeah. And physical and human factors, we have all seen and understood that climate change and global warming are some of the two of the key things or key elements or key words that we need to remember, or which are responsible for flooding. And then glacial lake outburst floods. You saw in the video there are around 3,000 glacial lakes in Pakistan. Around 30 of them are susceptible to bursting, causing floods in the future as well. And then there are heat waves. The temperature is rising rapidly, causing the glaciers to melt. And then there are intense monsoon rains, and settlements are around the nutrient-rich floodplains and some scenic lakes which are formed because of glacial lakes being melting. So we have to prepare and adapt for such events in the future. We all know that the global temperatures are set to rise, and it will cause more rainfall everywhere, not only in Pakistan but in other countries as well, and would increase the risk and frequency of flooding. But the thing is that the extent of flooding in Pakistan highlights the need for structural and non-structural flood control measures. However, there is a considerable disparity or inequality between the resources available to the developed countries compared to the developing or underdeveloped countries. Now, the contribution of Pakistan towards global warming, towards greenhouse gas emissions, is very less compared to the losses it is suffering. So it is very important in the long term that the adaptation measures require adequate funding and support from the developed countries, so that these preparation and adaptation measures are taken care of properly in the future. And recovery from such events is not very quick. It takes years. As I mentioned, that people are still suffering from the last year's flood, and we don't know if there are going to be more floods this year or the next years. So it's really devastating. And then there is another important dimension to note, the perception or understanding of the local communities about climate change and global warming. Now, the literacy rate is not very high in many areas, and some of the people think that climate change is not real. Still, they think and believe that climate change is not real. We conducted a short study in one of the cities in Pakistan with around 400 respondents, a mix of informal and formal settlements, and to see that how well they understand the risks of climate change. And it found that the psychological distance to climate change varies between informal and formal settlements. So the formal settlements are the ones which are properly built houses, and informal ones are mostly the ones living in floodplains or near to the floodplains. They move away when the water comes, they come back to the fertile land. So the people living in formal settlements are more aware, they understand the reality of the climate change and global warming as compared to informal ones. And the household income and number of children influences the psychological distance to climate change within the informal settlements, where people living in the informal settlements, they have low income and more number of children. So these factors also influence their understanding. Now, this study is a very small study, and however, it indicates that it is important to understand the local communities as well, their understanding of the phenomena. if we are looking into putting money into adaptation and preparedness strategies, we need to focus on the areas which need structural measures and the areas which need only non-structural measures maybe. So this could be a non-structural measure requiring less money and better outcomes, better results. So this was a quick section, and the last question is that what do you think are the main challenges for developing countries like Pakistan towards flood preparation and mitigation? So this is the last question. Sorry to bother you again and again, punching in on your phone. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for your responses. We'll just quickly see what we have got here in terms of the challenges you think. Okay, so yeah, education, awareness, financial resources, funding, psychological distance, lack of capital, politics. So yes, all of these genuine challenges that the country is facing, and most of these are not only relevant to Pakistan but also to other developing countries. I have prepared a two-pager resource which we will put onto the website. It has a lot of links to some of interesting maps, news stories, and other things that you can go over there and read in your own time. And then there's a link to an interesting mapping tool here, which you can explore in your own time as well. So it's a very interesting tool. It does not have the recent data of 2022 floods, but you can select a country here. The instructions are very clear. You can select a country, select the dates. Unfortunately, the 2022 data is not available still in this website. So it uses open data, open Earth data, and satellite images, and some machine learning and other things to generate flood inundation maps. So you can explore this tool in your own time. It does not work on the mobile phones. You can try it on your computers. So yeah, this pretty much covers what I had to present today. Sorry, I have taken maybe 20 minutes more than I was expected to. And if you have any questions, maybe you can write me an email or get in touch. Okay, thank you so much.